I'm going to share 5 things that I do in my life as a therapist and coach that really help me when I'm having a hard time. Watch this video to see what are the 5 hacks that help me that I really use almost weekly, if not daily at times. So I'm not going to lie, this video feels a little bit more personal to me, a little bit more vulnerable because I'm sharing things that I really do and giving examples from my life. So just kind of putting that out there. Okay, so let's jump in. So the first thing that I really say to myself, this really applies when I'm having like a really difficult emotion show up, and mostly when it shows up kind of out of the blue. So something I really tell myself, it's something along the lines like, it's okay that this hurts. I'm allowed to feel this way. And I know that might feel so simple and so like duh, but honestly, a lot of times, especially in the last couple of months or years, there's been things that have just unexpectedly happened in my life, and maybe things that have still lingered with me. And there's been this thing that has happened where in these quiet moments when I'm by myself or I'm driving by myself, that my mind will go there, right? And maybe you have a similar experience or many different experiences in your life when you have a quiet moment that your mind will just go to these maybe painful places. And maybe something will bring it on. Maybe you're listening to something that will make you think about it. Maybe something like there's a cue, a chain reaction that all of a sudden you start thinking about this thing. But for me, sometimes I've noticed like just when I'm in these moments of quiet, it will start to show up. And then there's feelings that show up with it. This feeling of sadness that might come up, fear, things along those lines, and tearfulness and so forth. And so before I know it, I'm like in the emotional experience. And so one thing that's been really helpful, because sometimes I notice an innate reaction to like judge myself for having this painful experience, especially when it's coming out of the blue, especially it's about something that happened a while ago. I kind of tell myself these stories like I should be over this, I shouldn't be feeling this way about this thing, or why am I feeling about this now? Does it make sense? And again, that's my mind trying to make sense of things, and maybe there's a instinct to want to push away from this feeling. So one thing that's really helped me is just to kind of lean in and drop to reminding myself like it's okay to feel this way, it's okay that it hurts, like it's okay. So kind of just that making room for this is just my experience in this moment. And depending on the situation, because I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to say that I always then just like go and lean into it. No, sometimes I don't. And sometimes I don't lean into it because it's not really workable in the moment. I'm on my way to work, so I really can't be in this really emotionally unregulated state, because especially the type of work that I do. Or sometimes it's just like I'm not in the headspace to really be there, I can't, and so forth. So there's an intentional choice at times. Other times, though, I will give myself permission to just be in that experience. Second thing that I really tell myself is this question that I constantly ask myself: how do I want to show up in this moment? And if you watch any of my other videos, I have probably said some version of that, because I also tell my clients this all the time. But I find that this is a really good kind of centering question for me, especially when I'm feeling overwhelmed or confused, or maybe there's feelings that are showing up that might be skewing the way that I want to show up in this moment. So especially if I'm feeling really afraid about something and maybe my instinct is to want to kind of go and hide, I really kind of stop and ask myself like, how do I want to show up in this moment? This is something, I'm not going to lie, that I use also a lot in my relationship when let's say me and my partner are having a disagreement and I'm noticing that maybe I'm not showing up in a good way, right? A less than ideal partner. And so sometimes I really will have to like pause and like kind of check in with myself and ask them like, how do I want to show up in this moment? Or maybe, right, the disagreement already passed, but you know, that state where maybe you and your partner like took a break and you guys are kind of still like not fully resolved, or it hasn't fully repaired. And really for me, it's even in that moment of like that break moment of saying like, how do I want to show up in this moment? So do I want to try to initiate a repair with my partner? Do I want to apologize? Do I want to take accountability for what I did wrong here? So this is just a great question that across the board, it's a really great anchor for me, regardless of what the situation is. And it helps me really tap into my values or what's important for me in this moment. Again, it doesn't mean that I always listen to how I want to show up in the moment, or that it works out flawlessly, or that I even sometimes remember to ask myself. But when I'm able to pause and ask myself, this is a really helpful question for me. Okay, another question that I really ask myself is what's driving my reactions or actions here? So again, this is another question where I will constantly be encouraging my clients and people I work with to really lean into this. First, creating that pause space. So first we have to build in like, how can we create that moment of pause? Really, that's when we tap into those present moment skills. So like breathing, noticing, just noticing like what's happening in your body, whatever the case is. But when I've already done that, this next piece is really trying to ask myself, like, what's driving my reactions or actions here, right? So especially, again, if I'm having a really kind of big emotional reaction, it's helpful for me to kind of ask myself, like, what's going on for me? Like, why is this something that's so reactive for me? And not, again, in a judgmental way, which I know sometimes I said I could do that, but more so in a really curious way, like trying to understand what's going on here, right? What is the themes that might be showing up for me? How is my historical context showing up here? What are the stories that I'm making up about this situation? And is holding on to those stories even helpful? Or am I showing up this way because I'm feeding into all these rules, or I should do, or I need to do? So I recently noticed that I felt like this pressure. I needed to do this, kind of this family obligation. And I felt like this overwhelming pressure, but it also was just like I was really stressed out. There was a lot of things also going on with work and other stuff. And so I just really had to check in with myself and saying, like, okay, what's driving my need or this obligation that I need to do this a certain way? And like, what rule am I holding on to? And can I let that go a little bit if it's not working in this setting? And of course, there was some family dynamics at play as well, but even getting really curious that, do I need to adhere to these like rules in my family if it's not really helpful for me? Okay, so the next one is kind of also related to this kind of openness, this willingness, like I talked about the first one, but really more so when I'm in like just immediate moment of like anxiety. So this really weird thing has happened for me in the last couple, maybe months. I can't even trace it, maybe even longer, years post-pandemic. I don't even know. But when I'm driving for whatever reason, when I get on the ramps here in Florida, certain ramps really cause me to get anxious, right? And maybe that's happened before earlier on, maybe not, I'm not even sure, but definitely something I've noticed more so now. So this really interesting thing is now I'm aware of it, now I know, now my mind is even like cued. So when I know that like the ramp is coming, I already know that might be my experience, but something that I've really leaned into in this moment is kind of again, like really like, okay, open, be with this experience. Just like, can you open up, open, just be with it? Can you allow this to be here? Can you just feel this experience? And like really breathing into that, like, here it is, here's just the experience, and opening up. Sometimes I might tell myself something along the lines like, this isn't going to kill you and so forth. But I even try not to get into that, like even conversational piece with my mind, because as we all know, our mind might like respond back, well, maybe it will, maybe it will. What if you make a wrong turn, right? And in my example, I'm literally driving. So my mind could definitely say, well, what if something happens on this ramp? So I really try not even to get into like, it'll be okay kind of thing, but more so just like, okay, just open. Can I just breathe in a little bit more space to this feeling, just be with it, like feel it, let it come, let it just do its thing, right? And so this is really me kind of embracing this concept of willingness and allowing it to be. Now, again, I'm not going to say I do this perfectly all the time. And a lot of times you'll see like there's a lot of tension that I'm like holding on to the steering wheel. And so same thing when I notice that, I'll try to like open, like, okay, I'm like, here I am. There's a lot of tension. I'm kind of white knuckling it. I'm not really being with it. But again, it's a practice that I really try to do. But this really important thing, I always kind of try to catch myself is when I'm doing this, not to do this like, okay, I'm just open in a way to get rid of my anxiety. I know that sounds really weird, but a lot of times when we try to control our anxiety in any way, right, we use any type of strategy to control, even like mindfulness or anything, right? We constantly hear, well, I tried to meditate and I couldn't meditate. I was still really anxious and overwhelmed. And at least from a perspective of ACT, that's not really the goal, isn't to feel better or get rid of an experience. It's just to be with an experience. And when we try to use a certain technique or strategy to get rid of it, this counterintuitive thing happens where then this experience just gets even further stuck in this like high realm. And so I also am really conscious of that. Like, I don't want to use this like open as like an undercover control or avoidance tool. Now I really try to like, okay, just like feel it, be with it, notice what's showing up. Okay, the next one, it's kind of more so like a prompt of like just noticing like, oh, I'm getting frustrated, I'm getting overwhelmed. And I know that because my tone, or I'm short, or I've changed my words, and then kind of prompting myself like, do I need a moment here? Or simultaneously, or what do I need here, right? So this is a little bit of a two-part. On one end, again, going back to that noticing, it's like that's kind of a little bit of my cue of like asking myself, like, am I getting annoyed here? Am I getting frustrated? Or just like feeling it. Like sometimes I can just like feel just like this overwhelming sense of annoyance and irritation, and like noticing like, man, I'm really annoyed today. Like what? And again, there might be certain reasons, there might not be, right? But that really important piece of just noticing it and like me having my own clues and cues to what that is. And then from that, it's asking myself, like, what do I need here? Or do I need a break? And more so, I say that do I need a break? That comes back to my example of a relationship or interactions with others, where, again, if I'm noticing a reaction and I'm responding based on that reaction, it's like, okay, do I need to take a step back here? Because I'm not really showing up in a way that I'm going to feel proud of later. But even in instances where it's just me alone, it's like, okay, I'm like, oof, what's going on here? And do I need to just like disconnect, shift, right? So even if I'm working and something is really bothering me, and not clearly within client work, but doing other admin stuff, it's like, okay, do I just need to like recalibrate here? Do I just need to take a moment, stretch, get up, make myself a tea, whatever the case is? Something else that I'll also do with this, depending on what the situation is, especially with my partner, I'll tell him like, oh man, I'm really irritated today. So I just need to be really aware of that. Although my partner's also really good at just noticing my cues, but that's not his responsibility, it's mine. But that's something else that you can really do with this, right? This really important piece of just noticing and labeling my experience, and then kind of cueing myself, like, what do I need in this moment? Whether I need an immediate break, or what do I need just overall? Like what skill or tool or emotional regulation skill would help me in this moment, or just anything, right? Behavioral tool, like in that moment, then you can just be really flexible. Thumbs up if you like this video, if you like kind of the different questions that I really use, or prompts or self-reflection that really help me. Give me a thumbs up to let me know that you really resonated with this type of content. So for now, this video is just a single video. It's not part of a larger series, but if you want more content like this, especially more kind of personal stories and personal examples, really subscribe to my email newsletter, because I really do share more there. I try to share more kind of personal stories or relevant stories that maybe I really sometimes forget to share here via this medium. So like I always say, I encourage you to continue nurturing your mind, body, and soul, whatever that looks like for you. Thanks, guys.